When Nova misses her flight and loses her last chance to say goodbye, a mysterious stranger offers quiet comfort, but when he vanishes, she thinks it was a fleeting moment until she sees his face again, on the news. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Nova James stared at the departures board as the word delayed flashed next to her flight number. Again, she'd already missed her first flight by 10 minutes. 10 minutes that cost her the chance to say goodbye to her grandmother. Now this delay felt like the universe twisting the knife. Final boarding call for Flight 372 to Chicago. The announcer's voice echoed through the terminal. That should have been her flight, the flight that would have gotten her to her grandmother's bedside before she passed. Nova clutched her phone, scrolling through the text messages from her mother. "She's gone, baby. I'm so sorry you couldn't make it in time." Nova's hands trembled as she tucked the phone back into her purse. The past year had been one disaster after another. First, the company she'd worked at for 5 years downsized, and her position was eliminated. Then her savings dwindled to nothing as she struggled to find new work. And now, the final blow, missing her chance to say goodbye to the woman who had practically raised her. Gate 14 for Flight 829 to Atlanta is delayed by 3 hours due to inclement weather. The announcement came, confirming what the board already displayed. Nova found an empty seat at Gate 14 and sank into it, her carry-on bag at her feet. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, physically spent. The tears were coming and she knew she couldn't stop them. She covered her face with her hands, trying to hide the breakdown she could no longer prevent. "Excuse me." A gentle male voice broke through her misery. Nova quickly wiped at her eyes and looked up. A tall man with kind eyes stood there. He wore a baseball cap pulled low and glasses that seemed a little too large for his face. Despite the casual disguise, there was something striking about him. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. Nova glanced around. The terminal wasn't full. There were plenty of other places to sit. Why would he choose to sit right next to someone who was obviously falling apart? "No," she said, her voice hoarse. "It's free." The man sat down, keeping a respectful distance. He didn't immediately pull out a phone or laptop like most travelers. Instead, he just sat there, a calming presence beside her. Nova tried to compose herself, embarrassed that a stranger had caught her at her lowest. She fumbled in her bag for a tissue. Without looking at her, the man held out a travel pack of tissues. "So you don't have to say anything," he said gently. "We can just sit." Something about his voice, the simple kindness of his offer, broke through Nova's walls. She took the tissues with a whispered "thank you" and let the tears flow freely. They sat in silence for several minutes, Nova crying quietly, the stranger simply being there, not intruding, not asking questions, just offering silent companionship that somehow felt more comforting than any words could have been. When her tears finally subsided, Nova took a deep breath. "I'm sorry," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "It's been a rough day." "Don't apologize," the man replied. "Airports see more honest emotions than most therapists' offices." That unexpected observation drew a small laugh from Nova. She looked at him properly for the first time. He was handsome in an understated way, with day-old stubble and tired eyes that suggested he was carrying his own burdens. "I'm Nova," she said, offering her name without really knowing why. The man smiled but didn't immediately respond with his own name. "Nice to meet you, Nova. Headed home or away from it?" "Home," she answered, "or trying to. I missed my connection earlier, and now this flight is delayed and—" She trailed off, not wanting to dump her life story on a stranger. "And it's the kind of day where nothing is going right," he finished for her. Nova nodded. "Exactly." The departure board updated again, adding another 30 minutes to the delay. "Looks like we'll be here a while," the man observed. "Have you eaten?" Nova shook her head. Food had been the last thing on her mind. "I was about to grab some coffee," he said. "Can I bring you something?" No strings attached, just one delayed traveler helping another. There was something so genuine in his offer that Nova found herself nodding. A coffee would be amazing, actually. Black with 1 sugar. "1 black coffee with sugar coming up," he said, standing. "I promise I'm not a serial killer or anything, just someone who's had enough bad days to recognize another person having one." "I'll watch your bag if you want to leave it," Nova offered, gesturing to his expensive-looking carry-on. "Thanks." He smiled and walked toward the airport cafe. Nova watched him go, puzzled by the encounter. In New York, where she lived, strangers didn't just strike up conversations and offer coffee, especially not men who looked like they could afford first-class tickets. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't place it. He returned 10 minutes later with 2 coffees and a small bag. They had those cinnamon rolls that are probably 3 days old but smell amazing, he explained, handing her a coffee and offering the bag. I took a chance. Cinnamon rolls are my weakness, Nova admitted, taking one. Thank you. She paused, waiting for him to fill in his name. Just a fellow traveler, he said with a smile that suggested he was deliberately avoiding the question. Sometimes it's nice to be nobody for a little while, isn't it? Nova understood that feeling all too well. To just exist without expectations or judgments. To be seen as a person, not a collection of failures and setbacks. Yes, she agreed, it is. They sipped their coffee in comfortable silence, watching the bustle of the airport around them. Families reuniting, business people rushing, couples embracing. A whole world of stories passing by. So, her companion said finally, bad day or bad year? Nova laughed softly. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's been there. She looked down at her coffee. Both, actually. Lost my job, burned through my savings, and today I missed my flight home by 10 minutes. 10 minutes that cost me the chance to say goodbye to my grandmother before she passed away. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with grief. I'm so sorry, he said, and the genuine compassion in his voice made Nova's eyes well up again. She raised me, you know. My mom worked 2 jobs, so Grandma was the one who was always there. She taught me everything, how to read, how to stand up for myself, how to make her secret sweet potato pie. Nova smiled through her tears at the memory, and I couldn't even be there to hold her hand at the end. Her companion was quiet for a moment. I lost my grandfather last year, he finally said. He was the only one in my family who ever really saw me, not what I could do for him, just me. Nova nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. The last thing he said to me was that I needed to learn how to be still, he continued, a faraway look in his eyes. That I was running so fast I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Sounds like good advice. The best, he agreed. I just wish I'd listened sooner. He looked at her curiously. What would you have said to your grandmother if you'd made it in time? Nova thought about it. That I'm trying my best. That even when everything falls apart, I remember what she taught me about finding grace in difficult times. She wiped away a tear. And that I love her. That I'll always love her. She knew, he said softly. People like that, they always know. Another announcement came over the speaker, updating their flight delay to 4 hours due to storms. Well, Nova's companion said with a sigh, looks like we have even more time to kill. What do you say we stop being sad strangers and try to make the most of this layover? Nova smiled, genuinely this time. What did you have in mind? Airport Olympics? He suggested with a mischievous grin. Event 1. Find the most overpriced bottle of water in the terminal. Nova laughed. Event 2. Spot the most stressed-out business person about to miss their connection. Event 3, he continued. Identify the most ridiculous souvenir in the gift shop that someone might actually buy. You're on, Nova said, surprising herself with how quickly this stranger had lifted her spirits. They spent the next hour wandering the terminal, pointing out absurdities and making up stories about the people they observed. Nova discovered her companion was witty and observant, with a kind of sensitivity that made him notice things others missed. Look at that little girl, he said, nodding toward a child of about 5 who was carefully arranging her stuffed animals on an airport chair. Future CEO, see how she's making sure everyone has the right seat assignment? Nova smiled. And that man over there, the one pretending to read the newspaper but actually watching the sports highlights on the TV. He told his wife he's on a business trip, but he's really going to a game. Her companion laughed. You're good at this. They found themselves at a viewing area, watching planes take off and land through the massive windows. I used to dream about being a pilot, Nova's companion said, watching a 747 lift into the air. The freedom of it, being above everything, seeing the world from a different perspective. Why didn't you? Nova asked. He shrugged. Family expectations. I was supposed to follow a certain path. And did you? Follow that path? I did, he said, a hint of regret in his voice. I exceeded every expectation. Became exactly what everyone wanted me to be, but not what you wanted to be, Nova guessed. He turned to look at her, surprised by her perception. No, not always. It's not too late, you know, she said, to change paths. What about you, he asked. What did little Nova dream of becoming? A writer, she admitted. I wanted to tell stories that made people feel less alone. And instead? Marketing coordinator for a company that sold luxury pet accessories, she said with a self-deprecating laugh. Not exactly changing the world, but you could, he said, with such conviction that Nova almost believed him. What's stopping you now? Reality builds the need to eat occasionally. He smiled. Fair points, but sometimes getting knocked off one path is the universe's way of pushing you onto the right one. They found a less crowded seating area and continued talking. Hours passed as they shared stories from their childhoods, favorite books, travel disasters, and dreams they'd set aside. They never exchanged last names or details about their current lives. It was as if they existed in a bubble outside of time, where only their true selves mattered. Okay, most embarrassing moment, Nova challenged, now comfortable enough to tease him. And it has to be real, not something that makes you look charmingly flawed. Her companion groaned. You drive a hard bargain. He thought for a moment. Fine. My first major business presentation. I was so nervous I drank about 6 cups of coffee beforehand. Halfway through my carefully rehearsed speech, I realized I desperately needed a bathroom. But I was in the zone and didn't want to stop. Oh no, Nova laughed, already seeing where this was heading. Oh yes, he confirmed with a grimace. I tried to power through, but apparently my discomfort was obvious. My boss finally said, "For God's sake, just go to the bathroom before you explode," in front of everyone. I had to run out while 20 executives watched. Nova burst out laughing. That's horrifying. Your turn, he insisted. Fair is fair. High school talent show, Nova admitted. I decided to sing Whitney Houston. Ambitious. Disastrous, she corrected. I hit a note so bad that my best friend's dad, who was recording the show, actually dropped his camera. You could hear him say, "What the hell was that?" on the recording, which of course everyone watched repeatedly for weeks. They both dissolved into laughter. We're a mess, Nova said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. The best kind, he agreed. As evening approached, they found themselves sitting side by side again, watching the sunset through the huge terminal windows. Their flight had been delayed again, now scheduled for a late-night departure. Hungry? He asked. Starving, Nova admitted. Wait here, he said, standing up. I've got an idea. He returned 20 minutes later with bags from 3 different airport restaurants. I couldn't decide, so I got options, he explained, laying out containers of pasta, burgers, and salads on the seats between them. Airport food court feast. This is amazing, Nova said, touched by the gesture. They ate together, talking and laughing like old friends, rather than people who had met just hours ago. When Nova mentioned her grandmother's sweet potato pie recipe, her companion insisted she describe it in detail, promising to try making it himself someday. As the night wore on, the terminal grew quieter. Many flights had been cancelled, and passengers had been rebooked or sent to hotels. But Nova and her companion remained, neither seeming eager to end their unexpected connection. Nova found herself growing tired, the emotional day catching up with her. Without thinking, she leaned her head against her companion's shoulder. Sorry, she murmured, starting to pull away. It's okay, he said softly. Rest. I'll wake you if there's any news about our flight. Feeling safer than she had in months, Nova closed her eyes. The last thing she remembered was the gentle weight of his jacket being placed over her shoulders. When Nova woke up, the terminal was bathed in the blue light of early morning. She blinked, disoriented, and then sat up straight. He was gone. The seat beside her was empty. His expensive carry-on was no longer there. Nova looked around frantically, but there was no sign of him in the nearby seats or at the gate counter. She noticed a coffee cup on the seat next to her with a napkin underneath. Picking it up, she found a note written in neat handwriting. Nova, thank you for reminding me how to be still, how to see what's right in front of me. Your grandmother would be proud of the grace you show in difficult times. Our paths crossed when we both needed it most. Some connections don't need names to be real. A fellow traveler. Nova clutched the note, feeling a confusing mix of warmth and disappointment. She'd shared more with this stranger in a few hours than she had with anyone in years. And now he was gone, without even telling her his name. Final boarding call for Flight 829 to Atlanta, the announcement came. Nova gathered her belongings, carefully tucking the note into her purse. As she boarded the plane, she couldn't help looking at every face, hoping to see him, but he wasn't there. The mystery man from Gate 14 had vanished as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving Nova with nothing but a memory and the lingering feeling that something important had just happened, something that might change everything. What she didn't know was that 2 weeks later, she would be scrolling through headlines on her phone and come face to face with him again, and the real story was only just beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Nova returned home to Atlanta. 2 weeks of funeral arrangements, family gatherings, and sorting through her grandmother's belongings. 2 weeks of job applications and rejection emails, and 2 weeks of wondering about the mysterious man from Gate 14. She sat at her mother's kitchen table, scrolling through news headlines on her phone, while half listening to her mother talk about the neighbor's new landscaping. They spent a fortune on those fancy trees, and mark my words, they won't last through summer in this heat, Diane James said, placing a plate of eggs in front of Nova. Nova responded absently, her thumb sliding through headline after headline. And then she stopped. Her heart jumped into her throat. The headline read, "Reclusive tech billionaire Beckett Langston re-emerges, citing a layover angel who changed his life." Below it was a photo of him, her airport companion, stepping out of a sleek car, sunglasses perched on his face, but unmistakably the same man who had shared cinnamon rolls with her and listened to her cry about her grandmother. "Nova? Honey, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Nova couldn't answer. She was too busy tapping on the article, her fingers trembling. Beckett Langston, the 30-year-old founder of Langston Ventures, made his first public appearance in 6 months yesterday at the Tech Forward conference in San Francisco. Langston, who famously disappeared from public view following what many described as a breakdown during a live-streamed investor meeting last October, surprised attendees with an unscheduled speech about reconnection and purpose. "Sometimes we get so caught up in building the future that we forget to live in the present," Langston told the crowd. "I recently met someone during an airport layover who reminded me what matters most isn't what we achieve, but how we connect with others along the way. She was my layover angel, though I never even told her my name." Nova nearly dropped her phone. She read the passage again, then again. It was him, the man from Gate 14, the one who'd bought her coffee and made her laugh during the worst day of her life, was Beckett Langston, the tech prodigy, whose face had been splashed across business magazines for years. And he was talking about her. "Nova!" Her mother's voice finally broke through. "What is going on? You're white as a sheet." "Mom," Nova said, her voice barely a whisper. "You know that guy I told you about? The one at the airport who was so kind to me? The mystery man who disappeared? What about him?" Nova turned her phone around to show her mother the article. "It's him." Diane's eyes widened as she looked at the photo, then back at Nova. "Beckett Langston, the billionaire, that's who you spent the day with at the airport?" Nova nodded, still in shock. "Well, I'll be..." Diane sat down heavily. "My daughter had a billionaire buying her airport coffee, and she didn't even know it. He never told me his name," Nova said, reading through the rest of the article. "He just said he was a fellow traveler." According to the article, Beckett had spent the past 6 months on a personal sabbatical after what the press had called his public meltdown, a moment during a major presentation when he'd suddenly stopped speaking, told everyone present that none of this matters, and walked off stage. He'd been largely out of the public eye since then, with rumors ranging from a nervous breakdown to drug addiction. But now he was back, with a new perspective that he credited to a chance meeting with a stranger at an airport. A stranger named Nova. "Does he mention your name in the article?" Diane asked. "No," Nova said, scanning to the end. "He just calls me his layover angel." "Angel, huh?" Diane gave a small smile. "Well, he's not wrong about that part." Nova set down her phone, her mind racing. She'd spent hours with one of the wealthiest, most influential men in the tech world, and neither of them had known who the other really was. They'd just been two people connecting on a human level. "What are you going to do?" Diane asked. "Nothing," Nova replied automatically. "What could I possibly do? Call up Langston Ventures and say, 'Hi, I'm the random woman your billionaire boss met at an airport.' Why not?" Diane raised an eyebrow. "He's clearly looking for you." "He's not looking for me, Mom. He was just making a point in a speech." But over the next few days, Nova couldn't stop thinking about Beckett. She found herself watching interviews with him online, seeing a different side of the man she'd met. In these videos, he was confident, sometimes arrogant, dressed in expensive suits, and speaking with authority about technological innovations and market disruptions. It was hard to reconcile this public persona with the gentle, thoughtful man who had sat with her for hours, who had listened to her stories and shared his own vulnerabilities. A week later, Nova was at her laptop in her mother's guest room, writing another cover letter for another job application, when her phone chimed with a news alert. "Beckett Langston launches search for mystery airport companion." Her heart racing, Nova opened the article. "Tech mogul Beckett Langston has taken to social media with an unusual request. help finding a woman he met during an airport layover approximately 3 weeks ago. Langston posted on his official accounts yesterday, asking for the public's assistance in reconnecting with the woman he has previously referred to as his layover angel. We met at gate 14. I never told her my name. She told me hers, Nova, but not her last name. She was traveling to Atlanta after missing a flight to see her grandmother who had passed away. If anyone knows Nova, or if she sees this herself, I'd like the chance to thank her properly for a conversation that changed my perspective completely. Nova stared at her phone in disbelief. Beckett Langston was looking for her, publicly. The article included a photo of Beckett holding a sign that read, "Looking for Nova from Gate 14, with contact information listed below." Diane burst into the room without knocking. "Have you seen it? It's all over the internet. He's looking for you, Nova." "I see that," Nova said, still stunned. "You have to contact him." Nova hesitated. "I don't know, Mom. This is weird. He's a billionaire. What would he want with me?" "You won't know unless you reach out," Diane said firmly. "And honey, sometimes good things happen to good people. Maybe this is the universe giving you a break after all you've been through." But Nova wasn't convinced. The man she'd connected with at the airport had been kind and genuine. What if Beckett Langston, billionaire tech mogul, was something else entirely? What if this was just a publicity stunt to rehabilitate his image after his public breakdown? Still, she couldn't deny the connection they'd shared. It had been real. At least, it had felt real to her. That night, Nova couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, remembering details from their conversation, how he'd talked about his grandfather, how he'd listened so intently when she spoke about her grandmother, the way he'd seemed to truly see her, not as someone to pity or rescue, but as a person with value and depth. At 3 a.m., she made a decision. She would reach out, but on her terms. The next morning, Nova created a new email address and sent a message to the contact information Beckett had provided. To Beckett Langston, I'm Nova, from Gate 14. Before I share more details to verify my identity, I'd like to know why you're looking for me. Our conversation meant a lot to me, but I'm uncertain about your motives now. Is this about genuine connection or something else? The layover angel. She hit send before she could change her mind. Less than an hour later, she had a response, not from an assistant or a PR team, but from a personal email address with Beckett's name. Nova, thank you for reaching out. I understand your caution and respect it completely. To verify I'm really talking to my Nova, you told me about your grandmother's sweet potato pie recipe and how she added a secret ingredient that made it special. You said the secret was a pinch of cardamom, which she discovered by accident one Thanksgiving when she was out of cinnamon. As for why I'm looking for you, because in 6 months of silence and meditation and expensive retreats, I never found the clarity I discovered in a few hours sitting beside you at Gate 14. You reminded me what it feels like to be seen as a person, not as a portfolio or a headline. You shared your grief and your dreams with a complete stranger, with such honesty that it made me want to be honest too. I left while you were sleeping because I was afraid that once you knew who I was, everything would change. But I haven't stopped thinking about our conversation since. This isn't about publicity or image rehabilitation. I would much prefer to have found you privately, but I didn't know how else to reach you. I'd like to meet again, Nova. No cameras, no publicity, just two people continuing a conversation that I, at least, wasn't ready to end. Beckett, P.S. Hi, tried your grandmother's sweet potato pie recipe. The cardamom makes all the difference. Nova read the email 3 times, tears forming in her eyes. He remembered the details of their conversation. He'd even tried to make her grandmother's recipe. She showed the email to Diane, who immediately declared, "You have to meet him." "I don't know, Mom. My life is complicated enough right now. I don't have a job, I'm living in your guest room, and I'm still grieving Grandma." "All the more reason to have something good happen," Diane insisted. "What have you got to lose?" What indeed, Nova wondered. Maybe just her heart. After careful consideration, Nova replied to Beckett's email, agreeing to meet him. They arranged to meet at a small coffee shop in Atlanta the following week. Beckett assured her he would come alone. No entourage, no security detail visible. The days leading up to their meeting were a blur of anxiety and anticipation for Nova. What would she wear? What would she say? Would the connection they'd felt at the airport still be there? Or had it been a product of their unusual circumstances? When the day finally arrived, Nova stood outside the coffee shop for a full 10 minutes before working up the courage to go inside. She'd chosen a simple blue dress that her grandmother had always said brought out her eyes, and had pulled her hair back into a neat bun. She spotted him immediately, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall. He wore jeans and a plain button-down shirt, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, much like the first time they'd met. Despite the casual clothes, he couldn't completely hide his imposing presence. Their eyes met, and Beckett stood up, a hesitant smile on his face. "Nova," he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. "Beckett," she replied, trying the name out for the first time. They stood looking at each other for a long moment, the busy coffee shop fading into the background. "You're real," he finally said. "I was half afraid I'd imagined you." "I thought the same about you," Nova admitted. "Though I didn't imagine you being a billionaire," he finished with a self-deprecating smile. "Famous," she corrected. "It's a bit intimidating." "Please don't be intimidated," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I'm still the same person you met at Gate 14, just with a more complicated LinkedIn profile." That made Nova laugh, breaking the tension. They ordered coffee, black with 1 sugar for her, just like at the airport, and fell into conversation. Beckett explained what had happened in the months before they met, the pressure that had been building, the panic attack during the presentation, the decision to step away from public life. "I was at the end of a silent retreat when we met," he told her. 21 days of no speaking, no devices, just meditation and introspection. I was supposed to be finding myself, but mostly I was finding new ways to overthink the same old problems." "And did the retreat help?" Nova asked. Beckett looked at her intently. "Not as much as 5 hours with you did." Nova felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. "I didn't do anything special. You were authentic," he said simply. "Do you know how rare that is in my world? People either want something from me or are trying to impress me. You just talked to me, laughed with me, fell asleep on my shoulder." Nova groaned with embarrassment. "I still can't believe I did that." "It was the highlight of my month," Beckett assured her. "But I need to apologize for leaving the way I did. It wasn't fair to you." "Why did you leave?" Nova asked the question that had been bothering her for weeks. Beckett was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Because I knew if I stayed until you woke up, if I saw your eyes open and look at me again, I wouldn't be able to walk away. And I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to deserve you." The raw honesty in his voice took Nova's breath away. "What do you mean, deserve me?" "I was a mess, Nova. Still am in many ways. I just spent half a year hiding from my responsibilities, questioning every decision I'd ever made. You were this bright, resilient woman facing real problems with such grace. You deserved someone whole, not someone still picking up the pieces of himself." Nova reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "We're all picking up pieces of ourselves, Beckett. That's just part of being human." Their coffee grew cold as they talked for hours, sharing the details of their lives they hadn't exchanged at the airport. Nova told him about her marketing career, her dream of writing, her struggle to find new work. Beckett told her about building his company from a dorm room idea to a global enterprise, the pressure of being labeled a wunderkind, the loneliness of success. "I want to see you again," Beckett said as they finally prepared to leave. "Not as a billionaire or whatever the press is calling me these days. Just as a man who enjoys your company enormously." Nova hesitated. "I let you give everything I had in silence that day at the airport, and then you disappeared like it didn't matter." "It mattered too much," Beckett said softly, echoing what he'd written in his email. "I left because I knew, if I stayed, I'd never walk away, and I wasn't ready to deserve you." "And now?" Nova asked, her heart pounding. "Now I'd like the chance to try," he said, "to be worthy of the trust you placed in a stranger at Gate 14. Nova looked into his eyes, the same kind eyes that had seen her at her lowest moment and offered comfort without judgment. "Okay," she said. "But I have conditions." Beckett smiled. "Name them." "No private jets, no fancy restaurants where the menu doesn't have prices, no penthouses. If we're going to get to know each other, it needs to be in the real world, my world." "Agreed," Beckett said without hesitation. "Though I should warn you, I'm a terrible cook." "That's okay," Nova laughed. "My grandmother taught me well." As they walked out of the coffee shop together, Nova felt a flutter of hope for the first time in months. Maybe this connection was something real. Maybe it could grow into something meaningful. What she didn't know was that their story was about to become complicated in ways neither of them could anticipate. Because while Beckett might want to live in Nova's world, his world, with all its privilege, pressure, and public scrutiny, wasn't going to make that easy. And Nova was about to discover that being seen by Beckett Langston meant being seen by everyone else too. Outside the coffee shop, a camera flashed. "Mr. Langston, is this your mystery airport angel?" a voice called out. Beckett's face darkened, and he instinctively moved to shield Nova. "I'm so sorry," he whispered to her. "This isn't what I wanted." But it was too late. By tomorrow, Nova's face would be splashed across gossip sites and social media. The private connection they'd shared was about to become very, very public, and Nova would have to decide if what they'd found at Gate 14 was strong enough to withstand the spotlight. Airport angel identity revealed. Meet Nova James, the woman who captured billionaire Beckett Langston's heart. The headline glared from Nova's phone screen the morning after their coffee shop meeting. Beneath it was a photo of her and Beckett leaving the cafe, his hand protectively on her back as he tried to shield her from the camera. Nova groaned and dropped her phone on the bed. She'd woken up to dozens of notifications, friend requests from strangers, messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years, and even a few interview requests from tabloid websites. "Nova," her mother called from downstairs. "Have you seen the news? You're all over the internet." "I know, Mum," Nova called back, burying her face in her pillow. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Beckett's name flashed on the screen. "I'm so sorry," were his first words when she answered. "This is exactly what I didn't want to happen." "How did they even find us?" Nova asked, sitting up in bed. "Someone at the coffee shop must have recognized me and tipped off a photographer." Beckett sighed. "I should have been more careful." "It's not your fault," Nova said. Though part of her wanted to blame him, this was his world, not hers. "What do we do now?" "First, I've got my PR team working to control the story. They'll issue a statement asking for privacy, but..." "Nova..." Beckett paused. "This is going to get worse before it gets better. These tabloids, they'll dig into your life, your past, your family. They'll make up stories if they can't find anything scandalous." Nova's stomach twisted with anxiety. "I didn't sign up for this, Beckett." "I know," he said quietly. "And if you want to walk away, I'll understand. I'll make sure they leave you alone." The thought of walking away from Beckett made Nova's chest ache. Their connection was still so new, so fragile, but it felt important, like something worth fighting for. "I don't want to walk away," she admitted, "but I also don't want my life turned upside down." "Let me come over," Beckett suggested. "We can talk about this face to face." Nova agreed, and an hour later Beckett arrived at Diane's modest suburban home. He came alone, driving a nondescript sedan, rather than the luxury car Nova had seen in photos online. Diane opened the door before he could even knock. "Well, well," she said, looking him up and down. "The billionaire himself." "Mom!" Nova exclaimed, mortified, but Beckett just smiled and offered his hand. "Mrs. James, it's a pleasure to meet you. Your daughter has told me wonderful things about you." "Has she now?" Diane raised an eyebrow but shook his hand. "Come on in, I made coffee." In the living room, surrounded by Diane's collection of family photos and knickknacks, Beckett looked oddly out of place in his designer jeans and cashmere sweater. Yet he seemed perfectly at ease, complimenting Diane on her home and accepting a mug of coffee with genuine thanks. "So," Diane said, settling into her armchair and fixing Beckett with a stern look. "You've got my daughter all over the gossip sites. What are you going to do about it?" "Mum, please," Nova groaned. "No, it's a fair question," Beckett said. "Mrs. James, I care about your daughter. The last thing I want is for her to be harassed because of her connection to me. I've already spoken with my security team about ensuring her privacy and safety." "Security team," Nova repeated. "Beckett, I don't need security. I need normalcy." "I understand," he said, turning to face her. "But the reality is being associated with me comes with complications. I just want to make sure you're protected." Nova shook her head, frustrated. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You can't just throw money and security teams at every problem." "I'm not trying to," Beckett insisted. "I'm trying to take responsibility for the situation I've put you in." "You didn't put me anywhere," Nova countered. "I chose to meet you. I chose to reach out when I saw that article. But I didn't choose this, becoming some kind of tabloid story." The tension in the room was palpable until Diane stood up. "I think I'll give you two some privacy. Beckett, there are cookies in the kitchen if you want some." Nova made them using her grandmother's recipe. After Diane left, Beckett and Nova sat in silence for a moment. "I'm sorry," Beckett finally said. "I've handled this badly." "No, I'm sorry," Nova sighed. "I'm overreacting. It's just, my life has been a series of disasters lately, and now this. It's overwhelming." Beckett moved to sit beside her on the couch. "Tell me what you need, Nova. Tell me how to make this right." Nova looked at him, really looked at him. Beyond the wealth and the status was the same man who had sat with her at gate 14, who had seen her at her lowest and offered comfort without judgment. "I need time," she said honestly. "Time to adjust to whatever this is between us. Time to figure out if I can handle the attention that comes with being in your orbit." Beckett nodded. "I understand, and I'll give you all the time you need." He hesitated, then added, "But I hope you'll still let me see you, on your terms, in your world, just like you said." "I'd like that," Nova admitted. They spent the rest of the morning talking, planning how to navigate their budding relationship while minimizing the public intrusion into Nova's life. Beckett suggested meeting at less popular places, using private entrances, even scheduling their dates at odd hours to avoid the paparazzi. "It sounds exhausting," Nova said. "It can be," Beckett acknowledged, "but you're worth it." The sincerity in his voice made Nova's heart flutter. When Beckett left, promising to call her later, Diane emerged from the kitchen with a knowing smile. "He's smitten with you," she declared. "He barely knows me," Nova protested. "Sometimes it doesn't take long to recognize something special," Diane said sagely. "Your father proposed to me after just 3 weeks, you know." "And look how that turned out," Nova muttered. Her father had left when she was 12, choosing a new family over the one he already had. "That's not fair," Diane said, her smile fading. "Your father and I had 20 good years before things fell apart, and we got you out of it. I'd say that was worth it." Nova softened. "I know, Mom. I'm sorry. I'm just scared. Beckett lives in a whole different world." "Maybe," Diane conceded, "but he looks at you like you're his world. That counts for something." Over the next few weeks, Nova and Beckett developed a routine. They would meet at quiet, out-of-the-way places. A small bookstore cafe, a community park, once even at a 24-hour diner at 3 a.m. when Beckett returned from a business trip. They were photographed occasionally, but as the novelty wore off, the tabloids lost interest in the billionaire and his airport angel story. There were newer, more scandalous celebrities to focus on. During those weeks, Nova saw different sides of Beckett. She saw the brilliant businessman who could discuss complex technological concepts with passion and clarity. She saw the thoughtful man who remembered every detail she shared about her grandmother. And she saw the wounded son who still carried the weight of never quite meeting his father's expectations. "He wanted me to be a doctor, like him," Beckett told her one evening as they walked through a deserted park. "When I started coding instead of studying biology, he told me I was wasting my potential." "That must have been hard," Nova said, squeezing his hand. "It was. Even after the company took off, after the first billion, he still introduced me as my son who plays with computers." Beckett laughed, but there was pain behind it. "Is that why you push yourself so hard?" Beckett looked surprised by the question. "Maybe. I never thought about it that way." Nova was falling for him. How could she not? He was kind, attentive, and genuinely interested in her dreams. When she mentioned her desire to write, he encouraged her to start a blog, offering to read her work and giving thoughtful feedback. But there were challenges too. Beckett's schedule was demanding, with last-minute trips and late-night emergencies. He tried to include Nova when he could, but she often found herself waiting for calls that came hours later than promised. And then there was the wealth gap. Despite her conditions about keeping things normal, the reality of dating a billionaire was anything but normal. Beckett tried to respect her wishes, but his idea of casual was still far removed from hers. "I made reservations for dinner tomorrow," he told her one day. "Nothing fancy, I promise, just a little place I found." The little place turned out to be a farm-to-table restaurant where the chef came out personally to greet Beckett and offered them a special menu not available to other diners. "This is your idea of not fancy?" Nova whispered after the chef left. "They don't even have a dress code," Beckett defended, though he looked sheepish. "I'm trying, Nova." "I know you are," she said, softening, "and the food does smell amazing." These small disconnects were manageable. What proved more difficult was integrating Nova into Beckett's professional world. 6 weeks into their relationship, Beckett invited Nova to attend a charity gala with him. "It's for a literacy foundation I support," he explained. "I thought you might enjoy it, given your love of writing and books." Nova agreed, though she was nervous about her first official public appearance as Beckett's date. Diane helped her shop for a dress, the most expensive piece of clothing Nova had ever owned, though she insisted on paying for it herself, despite Beckett's offers. The night of the gala, Beckett sent a car to pick her up. When she arrived at the venue, a grand hotel in downtown Atlanta, he was waiting for her at a private entrance, looking devastatingly handsome in a black tuxedo. "You are breathtaking," he said, his eyes wide as he took in her emerald green gown. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Nova replied, suddenly shy. Beckett offered his arm. "Ready?" Nova took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." The ballroom was filled with Atlanta's elite, business leaders, politicians, celebrities. All eyes turned to them as they entered, curious whispers following in their wake. Beckett, a silver-haired man, approached them, champagne in hand. "About time you showed up. The board has been asking about you." "Martin," Beckett nodded coolly. "May I introduce Nova James?" "Nova, this is Martin Wells, the chairman of Langston Ventures." Martin gave Nova an appraising look. "So you're the infamous airport angel. Beckett hasn't stopped talking about you." "All good things, I hope," Nova said, trying to match his confident tone. "Of course," Martin smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Beckett claims you've changed his entire perspective. Quite an achievement for a... What is it you do again?" Nova felt Beckett tense beside her. "I'm between positions at the moment," she answered honestly. "I was in marketing before." "How interesting," Martin said, in a way that suggested it was anything but. "Beckett, when you have a moment, there are some people you really should speak with. The Singapore deal is hanging by a thread." "Not tonight, Martin," Beckett said firmly. "Tonight is about the foundation." Martin's smile tightened. "Of course, but don't forget who pays for these charitable indulgences of yours." He nodded to Nova. "A pleasure to meet you, Ms. James." As Martin walked away, Nova felt a chill. "He doesn't like me." "Martin doesn't like anyone who might influence me in ways he can't control," Beckett said, guiding her toward the bar. "Don't let him bother you." But Martin wasn't the only one. Throughout the evening, Nova met dozens of people from Beckett's world, and while some were genuinely friendly, others viewed her with thinly veiled suspicion or condescension. "So refreshing to meet someone so authentic," one woman said, eyeing Nova's dress as if assessing its price tag. "How exactly did you two meet again?" asked another, though the story had been in every tabloid for weeks. By the time dinner was served, Nova's cheeks hurt from maintaining her smile. She was seated next to Beckett at the head table, acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way. "Are you okay?" Beckett whispered, noticing her discomfort. "Fine," Nova lied. "Just a little overwhelmed." After dinner, Beckett was pulled away by various important guests, each demanding a moment of his time. He tried to keep Nova included, but the conversations inevitably turned to business matters she knew nothing about. "I need some air," she finally told him, squeezing his hand. "I'll just step out for a minute." On a quiet balcony overlooking the hotel's garden, Nova took a deep breath of the cool night air. The sounds of the gala faded behind her, bringing welcome relief. "Not quite what you expected, is it?" Nova turned to find Martin Wells leaning against the balcony railing, smoking a cigar. "Mr. Wells," she acknowledged, immediately on guard. "I was just getting some fresh air." "I'm sure you were," he said. "It can be suffocating in there, especially when you're out of your depth." Nova bristled. "I wasn't aware there was a depth requirement for supporting children's literacy." Martin chuckled. "I like you, Ms. James. You've got spirit. But let's be honest with each other. You don't belong in Beckett's world." "I think that's for Beckett to decide," Nova replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Beckett is going through a phase," Martin said dismissively. "This soul-searching meaning-of-life nonsense. It happens to men like him sometimes. They achieve tremendous success young, and then they panic, wondering if they've missed something along the way." He took a puff of his cigar. "You're his midlife crisis, Ms. James. A charming one, I'll grant you, but temporary nonetheless." Nova felt as if she'd been slapped. "You don't know anything about our relationship." "I know Beckett," Martin countered. "I've known him since he was a scrawny kid with a laptop and a dream. I've mentored him, guided his career, helped him build Langston Ventures into what it is today. And I know that this, whatever this is with you, is a distraction he can't afford right now." "A distraction?" Nova repeated, anger rising in her chest. "The company is at a critical juncture. We're about to launch the most important product of our history, and we need Beckett focused, not mooning over some airport encounter like a lovesick teenager." "I think you should leave," Nova said, her voice cold. "I will," Martin nodded. "But first, let me make you an offer." "I'm not interested in any offer you might make." "Hear me out," Martin insisted. "You seem like a practical woman. You're unemployed, living with your mother, trying to build a new life after a series of setbacks." "Admirable, really," Nova stared at him, unsettled by how much he knew about her personal circumstances. Langston Ventures has a non-profit foundation, Martin continued. We fund various initiatives, including several related to literacy and education. I could arrange a position for you there. Good salary, meaningful work, and most importantly, a clean break from Beckett. You want to pay me to leave him? Nova was incredulous. I want to offer you a dignified exit, Martin corrected. Before this relationship runs its natural course and leaves you both worse off, think about it. You'll have financial security, a career aligned with your interests, and Beckett can refocus on what he does best. Nova felt sick. I think you've misunderstood something fundamental, Mr. Wells. I'm not with Beckett for his money or what he can do for my career. I'm with him because I care about him. The person, not the billionaire. Martin sighed. Noble sentiments. But ask yourself this. If Beckett weren't wealthy or powerful, if he were just an ordinary man with ordinary problems, would your connection still feel so special? Or is it the fairy tale of it all? The billionaire who noticed you in your darkest moment, that you're really in love with? Before Nova could respond, the balcony door opened and Beckett appeared. There you are, he said, smiling at Nova, before noticing Martin. His expression hardened. Everything okay out here? Just getting acquainted with your lovely companion, Martin said smoothly. We were discussing career opportunities, actually. Beckett's eyes narrowed. Were you? Mr. Wells thinks I'd be perfect for a position at your foundation, Nova said, watching Martin's face carefully. He was just explaining the benefits of a clean break between us so you can focus on your company. The color drained from Beckett's face. Martin, what the hell are you doing? Martin held up his hands. Just looking out for the company's interests and yours. Someone has to. Get out, Beckett said, his voice dangerously quiet. Now. Don't overreact, Beckett, Martin scoffed. You know I'm right. This infatuation. I said get out. Beckett's voice rose, drawing attention from guests inside. And if you ever try to interfere in my personal life again, you'll be looking for a new job, chairman or not. Martin's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was letting you think you had any say in how I live my life, Beckett replied. Now leave before I have security escort you out. After a tense moment, Martin straightened his jacket and walked back inside without another word. Beckett turned to Nova, his expression anguished. Nova, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he would... It's okay, Nova said, though it wasn't. He's protective of you, in his own twisted way. What he did was unforgivable, Beckett insisted. Trying to buy you off, acting like our relationship is some kind of phase. He doesn't get to decide what matters to me. Nova leaned against the balcony railing, suddenly exhausted. But he made some points that hit home, Beckett. We do come from completely different worlds, and maybe that does matter. It doesn't, Beckett said fiercely. Not to me. But it should, Nova argued. Look at tonight. I'm completely out of place here. These people, your colleagues, your friends, they see me as an interloper, the nobody who somehow caught your attention. That's their problem, not ours. Is it? Nova challenged. Because it feels like our problem when I can't have a conversation with anyone here without feeling judged or patronized, when your board chairman is so concerned about my influence on you that he offers me a job to leave you alone. Beckett ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Martin doesn't speak for me or the company. I'll deal with him. That's not the point, Nova sighed. The point is, this is your life, Beckett. These galas, these people, these business deals. This is your world, and I don't know if I fit in it. Then we'll make a new world, Beckett said, taking her hands in his. One where we both fit, together. The intensity in his eyes made Nova's heart ache. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that love could be enough to bridge the chasm between their lives. Can we go? She asked quietly. I think I've had enough of the gala for one night. Beckett nodded, wrapping an arm around her waist. Let's get out of here. In the car on the way back to Diane's house, they sat in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Nova leaned her head against the window, watching the city lights blur past. She was falling in love with Beckett, had probably been falling since Gate 14, but tonight had forced her to confront the reality of what loving him would mean. It wasn't just about paparazzi or tabloid stories. It was about entering a world where people like Martin Wells had power and influence, where relationships were sometimes seen as strategic alliances rather than matters of the heart. What are you thinking? Beckett asked softly, breaking the silence. Nova turned to look at him. I'm thinking that I care about you too much to be the reason your business suffers. to be a distraction when you need to be focused. You're not a distraction, Nova, Beckett said firmly. You're the clearest thing in my life. Before I met you, I was lost, going through the motions, building technology for the sake of building it, making money because that's what I was supposed to do. You reminded me why any of it matters. And what does matter? Nova asked. Connection, Beckett answered without hesitation. Real human connection. The kind we found at Gate 14. The kind I've been searching for my whole life without even knowing it. He reached for her hand across the seat. I'm not going to let Martin or anyone else take that away from us. Not unless you want to walk away. I don't, Nova admitted. But I'm scared, Beckett. Scared that sooner or later you'll realize that Martin is right, that I don't belong in your world. Then let me belong in yours, Beckett said simply. Let me show you that what we have is stronger than bank accounts or board meetings or society galas. When they reached Diane's house, Beckett walked Nova to the door. I meant what I said, he told her. I'll fight for us, Nova, for this connection. Because what we found at Gate 14 wasn't chance or coincidence. It was real. Nova looked up at him, this man who had seen her at her most vulnerable, and still thought she was special, who was willing to challenge his entire world for the chance to be with her. Okay, she said softly. We'll try. Beckett's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He leaned down and kissed her gently, a promise sealed under the porch light of a suburban home. What neither of them knew was that Martin Wells was not a man who accepted defeat easily, and he had already set in motion a plan to protect Beckett and Langston Ventures from what he saw as a dangerous distraction. A plan that would test Nova and Beckett's connection in ways they couldn't imagine. The weeks following the charity gala were a delicate balance for Nova and Beckett. True to his word, Beckett made changes to prioritize their relationship. He scaled back his work hours, delegated more responsibilities to his executive team, and even rescheduled a major investor meeting to attend a memorial service for Nova's grandmother. Sure, you didn't have to do that, Nova told him as they walked back to the car after the small ceremony, where Nova had planted a rose bush in her grandmother's favorite garden. I wanted to, Beckett said, taking her hand. She was important to you, which makes her important to me. Nova was touched by these gestures, by the way Beckett was genuinely trying to be part of her world rather than simply pulling her into his. They spent evenings cooking dinner in Diane's kitchen, weekends exploring local farmers markets, and quiet afternoons where Beckett would work on his laptop while Nova wrote in her journal. It was during one of these peaceful afternoons that Nova's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Hello, she answered cautiously. Is this Nova James? A professional female voice asked. Yes, it is. Ms. James, my name is Elaine Parker. I'm calling from Harper & Mills Publishing. We recently received a writing sample with your name on it, a personal essay about connecting with a stranger during an airport layover. Nova's breath caught. She hadn't submitted any writing to publishers. I'm sorry, but I didn't send anything to Harper & Mills, she said, confused. The submission came through our Emerging Voices program, with a note saying you might not be aware it had been submitted. Regardless of how it reached us, we found your writing compelling and would like to discuss the possibility of expanding it into a full memoir. Nova's mind raced. Who would have submitted her writing without telling her? She had been working on essays about her experience with Beckett, but she'd only shared them with... She looked across the room at Beckett, who was pretending to be absorbed in his laptop, though a small smile played at the corner of his mouth. Can I call you back? Nova asked the publisher. I need to discuss this with someone first. After hanging up, Nova crossed her arms and stared at Beckett. Did you send my writing to Harper & Mills? Beckett finally looked up, his expression a mix of guilt and excitement. I might have. Beckett, those essays were private. I wasn't ready to show them to anyone, let alone a major publisher. I know, and I'm sorry for overstepping, he said quickly. But Nova, your writing is incredible. You have this way of capturing emotions that feel so authentic, so raw. The world deserves to read it. Nova was torn between anger at the invasion of privacy and astonishment that a publisher was actually interested in her work. You had no right, she said, though her tone had softened. You're right, Beckett acknowledged. I got excited and jumped ahead. But the publisher's interest? That's all you, Nova. They don't know you're connected to me. I made sure of that. Nova sank onto the couch beside him. They want me to write a memoir. About us? Beckett asked, suddenly looking concerned. I think so. About connection and chance meetings and... She trailed off, still processing the opportunity. You should do it, Beckett said, taking her hand. If you want to, I'll support you completely, financially, emotionally, whatever you need. I don't need your financial support, Nova said automatically. I know you don't, Beckett smiled. But the offer stands. This is your dream, Nova. Your chance to tell stories that help people feel less alone. Nova was quiet for a moment, thinking, I'll call them back, she decided, just to hear what they have to say. That phone call changed everything. The publisher was indeed interested in Nova's story, her personal journey of loss and resilience, culminating in the unexpected connection with a stranger who turned out to be a billionaire. They offered her an advance that would allow her to focus on writing full-time. This is really happening, Nova said in wonder after signing the contract a week later. You made it happen, Beckett insisted. Your talent, your voice. As Nova began working on her book, her relationship with Beckett deepened. He found a small house for rent near Diane's neighborhood. Nothing extravagant, but private enough that they could spend time together away from prying eyes. This is nice, Nova said, curled up beside him on the porch swing one evening, watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk. Normal. Is normal good? Beckett asked, stroking her hair. Normal is perfect, Nova smiled, but their peaceful bubble couldn't last forever. As the launch date for Langston Ventures' new product line approached, Beckett was pulled back into his corporate world more and more frequently. I have to fly to San Francisco tomorrow, he told Nova over dinner one night. The development team is having issues with the interface, and the marketing rollout begins next week. How long will you be gone? Nova asked, trying to hide her disappointment. It would be his third trip in 2 weeks. Just 2 days, Beckett promised. I'll be back for the weekend. 2 days turned into 4, then a week. Nova understood. This product launch was the biggest in the company's history, the culmination of years of research and development. But understanding didn't make the absence any easier. They spoke every night, Beckett's tired face on video calls apologizing for another delay, another emergency that needed his attention. Nova reassured him it was fine, focusing instead on her writing, which was coming together better than she'd expected. What she didn't tell Beckett was that Martin Wells had reached out to her again. Ms. James, his voice had oozed confidence over the phone. I hope you've had time to reconsider my offer. I haven't, Nova said firmly, and I don't appreciate you contacting me. I understand your reluctance, Martin continued, as if she hadn't spoken, but I think you'll find recent developments enlightening. Beckett has been quite busy in California, hasn't he? Nova's stomach tightened. He's working, I'm aware of that. Working, yes, among other activities. Check your email, Ms. James. I've sent you something that might interest you. Against her better judgment, Nova had opened the email to find photos of Beckett at various events in San Francisco, industry parties, dinners, a yacht outing. In most of them, he was accompanied by a stunning blonde woman, laughing and looking completely at ease. Her name is Alessandra Mercer, Martin said when Nova didn't respond. She's the head of product design at Langston Ventures' West Coast division. She and Beckett have a history that predates your airport encounter. I'm hanging up now, Nova said, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. The offer still stands, Martin said quickly. A position at the foundation, a clean separation, before this gets messier than it needs to be. Nova ended the call and sat staring at the photos. Beckett hadn't mentioned attending any social events, let alone with a beautiful colleague. But then, why would he? They weren't the kind of couple that monitored each other's every move. Still, doubt crept in like a poison. What did she really know about Beckett's life in California, about his past relationships, about the woman in the photos who looked so comfortable by his side? Nova didn't mention the photos or Martin's call during her next video chat with Beckett. Instead, she watched his face carefully as he talked about the progress they were making, the late nights at the office, the pressure from the board. He seemed sincere, exhausted, but focused on returning to Atlanta as soon as possible. I miss you, he said, his eyes soft even through the screen. This will all be over soon, and then we can get back to our normal. Nova wanted to believe him. She did believe him, but Martin's insinuations lingered, creating a shadow of doubt. The day before Beckett was finally scheduled to return, Nova received another email, this one from an anonymous address, with more photos attached. Beckett entering a high-end apartment building with Alessandra late at night, the two of them having breakfast at an outdoor cafe, heads close together in conversation, and a final photo that made Nova's heart stop. Beckett embracing Alessandra, his face buried in her hair in what looked like an intimate moment. Nova's phone rang almost immediately after she opened the email. Did you receive my follow-up, Ms. James? Martin's voice was smug. Stop sending me these, Nova said, her voice shaking. Stop interfering in our lives. I'm merely providing information that you deserve to have, Martin replied. Beckett is returning to his real life, Nova. The life he temporarily escaped from when he met you. It was inevitable. Nova ended the call and sat in her mother's kitchen, staring at nothing. The rational part of her knew these photos could be innocent, could be manipulated, could be Martin's desperate attempt to drive a wedge between them. But another part, the part that had been left before, the part that had seen her entire life fall apart in the past year, wondered if it had all been too good to be true. Diane found her there an hour later, still staring at her phone. What's wrong, baby? She asked, immediately sensing Nova's distress. Nova showed her the photos, explained Martin's calls, and voiced her fears that Beckett was pulling away, returning to his real world, a world where Nova had no place. Have you talked to Beckett about this? Diane asked practically. No, Nova admitted. He's under so much pressure with the launch. And what would I say? Your boss sent me stalker photos of you with another woman. That's exactly what you should say, Diane insisted. Relationships need honesty, Nova, especially when someone is trying to come between you. Nova knew her mother was right, but fear held her back. Fear that confronting Beckett would confirm her worst suspicions. Fear that what they'd found at Gate 14 wasn't strong enough to survive in the real world. She was still wrestling with her doubts when Beckett called the next morning. I have good news and bad news, he said, looking tired but happy. The good news is the interface issues are resolved, and the launch is back on schedule. That's great, Nova said, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. What's the bad news? I have to stay through the weekend for final approvals, Beckett sighed. But I promise this is the last delay. I'll be home Monday and then I'm taking 2 weeks off. Just you and me. Nova nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Sounds good. Beckett frowned, noticing her subdued reaction. Is everything okay, Nova? You seem distant. This was her moment to confront him, to ask about Alessandra, to tell him about Martin's interference. Instead, she said, I'm fine, just focused on a difficult chapter in the book. Okay, Beckett said, though he didn't look convinced. I love you, Nova. I know this has been hard, me being away so much, but it's almost over. It was the first time he'd said those words, I love you. In any other circumstance, Nova's heart would have soared. Now, with doubt clouding her mind, she couldn't bring herself to say them back. I'll talk to you tomorrow, she said instead. After hanging up, Nova made a decision. She couldn't continue like this, letting Martin's manipulation poison what she and Beckett had built. She needed to see Beckett face to face, to look in his eyes when she asked about Alessandra and the photos. Before she could talk herself out of it, Nova booked a flight to San Francisco for the next morning. Are you sure about this? Diane asked as she drove Nova to the airport. No, Nova admitted, but I'm sure that I can't move forward with all these questions. I need to know the truth, whatever it is. That's my girl, Diane said with approval. Go get your answers. As Nova boarded the plane, memories of another flight, the one she'd missed, the one that had led her to Gate 14 and Beckett, filled her mind. How strange that her life had been changed by a missed connection, and now she was flying across the country to discover if that connection was still true. She hadn't told Beckett she was coming. Part of her wanted to surprise him, to see his unguarded reaction. Another part feared what that reaction might be. In San Francisco, Nova took a taxi to the Langston Ventures headquarters, an impressive glass and steel building downtown. The security guard at the reception desk looked at her skeptically when she asked for Beckett. Do you have an appointment? He asked. No, but Mr. Langston is in meetings all day preparing for the product launch, the guard said dismissively. No unscheduled visitors. Could you at least let him know I'm here? Nova asked. Nova James. He'll want to see me. The guard's expression changed slightly at her name. You're Nova James? Yes, she confirmed, surprised by his recognition. One moment. He picked up the phone and spoke quietly, then looked back at Nova. Someone will be down to escort you up. Nova's heart pounded as she waited in the lobby. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and a professionally dressed woman approached her. Ms. James, I'm Patricia, Mr. Langston's executive assistant. He's in a board meeting right now, but he asked that you be shown to his office to wait. He'll be there as soon as possible. Nova followed Patricia into the elevator and up to the top floor, where Beckett's corner office offered stunning views of the city and the bay beyond. It was minimally decorated but unmistakably high-end, with modern art on the walls and sleek furniture. "Can I get you anything while you wait?" Patricia asked. "Coffee? Water?" "Water would be great, thank you," Nova said, feeling out of place in the executive suite. After Patricia left, Nova walked around the office looking for signs of the Beckett she knew in this corporate environment. There were few personal touches: a photo of his grandfather on the desk, a small model of the first computer he'd ever built, and, to her surprise, a framed napkin with the note he'd left her at the airport. "Thank you for reminding me how to be still." Nova touched the frame gently, emotion welling up inside her. Whatever else was happening, that moment had been real for both of them. The office door opened and Nova turned, expecting Patricia with water. Instead, a tall blonde woman walked in, the same woman from the photos, even more beautiful in person. "Oh," she said, stopping short when she saw Nova. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize anyone was in here. I'm waiting for Beckett," Nova explained, trying to keep her voice neutral despite the knot forming in her stomach. The woman's eyes widened with recognition. "You must be Nova. I'm Alessandra Mercer." She extended her hand with a warm smile that didn't match Nova's expectations. Nova shook her hand, studying Alessandra's face for signs of discomfort or guilt. There were none. "It's wonderful to finally meet you," Alessandra continued. "Beckett talks about you constantly, to the point where the entire development team feels like we know you already." "He does?" Nova asked, caught off guard by Alessandra's friendliness. "Absolutely. Nova thinks this interface is too complicated. Nova would want this to be more intuitive. You've been his reference point for the entire redesign process." Alessandra laughed lightly. "We're all a bit jealous of how much your opinion matters to him." Nova didn't know what to say. This wasn't the confrontation she'd been bracing for. "I just left the board meeting," Alessandra continued. "Beckett is wrapping up a few points, but he should be here soon. He nearly jumped out of his chair when Patricia passed him the note saying you were here. I've never seen him end a discussion with Martin so abruptly." At the mention of Martin's name, Nova stiffened. Alessandra noticed her reaction. "Not a fan of Martin, I take it. Join the club. He's brilliant at business, but his people skills leave something to be desired." "You could say that," Nova replied carefully. "He seems to have strong opinions about Beckett's personal life." "Martin thinks anything that distracts from the company is a problem," Alessandra nodded. "But between us, he's wrong about you. Since Beckett came back from that airport layover, he's been more focused, more innovative than I've seen him in years." She smiled conspiratorially. "Just don't tell Martin I said so." The door burst open, and Beckett rushed in, his tie loosened and his expression a mix of surprise and joy. "Nova!" he exclaimed, crossing the room in a few long strides to embrace her. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" Nova returned his embrace, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling the solid warmth of him. In that moment, her doubts seemed ridiculous. "I'll leave you two alone," Alessandra said tactfully, moving toward the door. "Thanks, Ali," Beckett said over his shoulder, still holding Nova. "Can you handle the rest of the marketing review?" "Already on it, boss," Alessandra assured him before leaving and closing the door behind her. Beckett pulled back to look at Nova's face, his hands gently cupping her cheeks. "Not that I'm not thrilled to see you, but what prompted this surprise visit? You hate flying." Nova took a deep breath. "I need to show you something." She pulled out her phone and opened the emails from Martin, showing Beckett the photos and explaining the calls. Beckett's expression darkened as he scrolled through the images. "Martin sent these to you? With insinuations about me and Alessandra?" Nova nodded. "The last ones came yesterday. You and her, hugging outside that apartment building. The night her father died," Beckett finished for her, his voice tight with anger. "She got the call during our late meeting. I took her home and stayed with her until her brother arrived." "That's what Martin is using to try to drive you away?" A moment of human compassion. Nova felt simultaneously relieved and foolish. "I didn't know what to think. The photos, the late nights, you being so distant." "I've been distant because I've been working 18-hour days to finish this launch," Beckett said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "And because I've been trying to finalize a surprise for you. Not because I'm rekindling something with Ali, who, by the way, is happily married to her wife of 5 years. Nova's eyes widened. Oh, indeed," Beckett said, a hint of a smile breaking through his anger. "Martin knows exactly what he's doing, Nova. He's manipulating images and situations to create doubt, to make you believe I'm not the man you think I am." "I'm sorry," Nova said, feeling ashamed for doubting him. "I should have just asked you directly." "Yes, you should have," Beckett agreed. But I understand why you didn't. This relationship, it still feels fragile sometimes, doesn't it? Like it might not survive outside the bubble we've created. Nova nodded, tears filling her eyes. I was scared. Scared that what Martin was saying might be true, that I was just a temporary distraction from your real life. Nova, Beckett said seriously, taking her hands in his. You are my real life. Everything else, the company, the money, the status, that's just circumstance. What we found at Gate 14, that connection, that's what's real. He led her to the window, pointing to the bay. See that building on the water? The one with the copper roof? Nova nodded, spotting the distinctive building. That's the San Francisco Maritime Museum. It's where I've been spending every free moment for the past 2 weeks, meeting with the event planner, the caterer, the musicians. Event planner? Nova repeated, confused. For your book launch party, Beckett explained. Harper & Mills is planning to release your memoir next spring, and I wanted to surprise you with the perfect venue. Somewhere beautiful but intimate, with views of the water you love so much. Nova stared at him in disbelief. You've been planning my book launch? But the manuscript isn't even finished yet. I know it will be, Beckett said confidently, and I know it will be incredible. I wanted to have something special waiting for you when you reach that milestone. Tears spilled down Nova's cheeks. I can't believe you did that. I can't believe I doubted you. Martin is very good at creating doubt, Beckett said grimly. It's one of his business tactics. But it stops now. He picked up his phone and dialed. Patricia, call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning and have security escort Martin Wells off the premises immediately. His credentials are to be revoked. After ending the call, Beckett turned back to Nova. I should have done that weeks ago after the gala. I'm sorry I let him hurt you. What will happen now? Nova asked, worried about the repercussions. Now Martin will learn that some things are non-negotiable, Beckett said firmly. The board will support me. Most of them have been uncomfortable with Martin's methods for years, but he delivers results, so they look the other way. Not anymore. He pulled Nova close again. And as for us, no more doubts. No more letting others come between what we know is real. Nova rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I love you, she said softly. I should have said it when you did. I was just scared, Beckett finished for her. I know, I was terrified the first time I said it. But Nova, loving you is the easiest, most natural thing I've ever done. Easier than coding. Easier than making billions. He smiled against her hair. Almost as easy as talking to a beautiful stranger at Gate 14. They stood together, looking out at the city bathed in afternoon sunlight. The path ahead wouldn't be simple. Nova still had her book to finish. Beckett had a company to run, and there would always be those who didn't understand what they saw in each other. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Let's go home, Beckett said. To Atlanta, Nova asked. Anywhere you are is home to me, Beckett replied. But yes, Atlanta for now. I have a product to launch this weekend, and then I'm all yours for 2 solid weeks. Maybe we can even take a real trip somewhere. I don't need a trip, Nova said honestly. I just need you, present, real. That I can promise, Beckett said, sealing the vow with a kiss. 3 months later, Nova sat in the living room of the small house she now shared with Beckett in Atlanta. Her completed manuscript sat on the coffee table, ready to be sent to her editor in the morning. Nervous? Beckett asked, joining her on the couch. Terrified, Nova admitted. What if no one wants to read about how a missed flight and a chance meeting changed my life? Then they'll be missing out on the most beautiful story I've ever heard, Beckett said, pulling her close. The past months had brought changes for both of them. Beckett had restructured Langston Ventures, appointing Alessandra as the new chairperson after Martin's departure. He'd opened a new office in Atlanta so he could split his time between there and San Francisco. Nova had finished her book and had started leading writing workshops for underprivileged youth, something she'd always wanted to do. She and Beckett had found their rhythm, balancing his corporate responsibilities with her creative pursuits, his wealth with her independence. It wasn't always easy. There were still photographers who occasionally followed them, social events where Nova felt out of place, moments of doubt when their different backgrounds created misunderstandings. But they worked through each challenge together, always coming back to the connection they'd found that day at Gate 14, the day when 2 strangers had seen each other, truly seen each other, beyond status or circumstance. I have something for you, Beckett said, reaching into his pocket. A sort of early celebration for finishing the book. He handed Nova a small envelope. Inside was a plane ticket, one way to Paris. Paris? Nova questioned, looking up at him in surprise. I know how much you've always wanted to go, Beckett explained. Your grandmother told you stories about visiting there as a young woman. You mentioned it that day at the airport. Nova was touched that he remembered such a small detail from their first conversation. But there's only one ticket, she noted. Aren't you coming with me? Beckett smiled mysteriously. Keep looking in the envelope. Nova reached back in and found a small note, similar to the one he'd left her at the airport all those months ago. I waited with you once, it read. Now I'm waiting again, at gate 14. This time I'm not going anywhere unless you're coming with me. She looked at him questioningly. Check the date on the ticket, Beckett prompted. Nova did. It was for exactly 1 year after the day they'd met. I'll be at gate 14, Beckett explained. With a ticket of my own, if you show up, we'll go to Paris together. And then, he reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Nova's breath caught as Beckett opened it to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. If you show up, he continued, his voice thick with emotion, I'll ask you a very important question. One I've been wanting to ask since I watched you sleep on my shoulder and realized I never wanted to let you go. Tears filled Nova's eyes. You know I'll be there, she whispered. You don't have to wait a year to ask me. I know, Beckett smiled. But gate 14 is where our story began. It seems right that the next chapter should start there too. He took her hand. Besides, it gives us a year to make sure this is what you want. A year for you to be absolutely certain that you're choosing me. Not the billionaire, not the fairy tale, but the man who sat beside you when you were crying and said, you don't have to say anything. We can just sit. Nova looked at the ticket, the note, and the man she loved, the man who had seen her at her lowest and still thought she was special. I don't need a year, she said, but I love that you're giving me one, that you understand this isn't about rushing or grand gestures. It's about building something real day by day. Beckett slipped the ring back into his pocket. For safekeeping, he said, until gate 14. Nova leaned in to kiss him, certain that whatever waited for them at that gate a year from now, they would face it together. Their story had begun with a missed connection that led to the most important connection of their lives, and while their journey hadn't been easy, the turbulence had only proven how strong their bond truly was. In 1 year, Nova would stand at gate 14 again, this time not as a woman broken by circumstance, but as a woman who had found her voice, her purpose, and a love that had arrived when she least expected it. And Beckett would be waiting, just as he had promised. Because some connections transcend chance, some meetings are destined, and some layovers change the course of your entire life. The end.